Hello and welcome to the Two Trees podcast. This is John Dillon, and I'm here with Jacob Kessling.
What's up, guys? Back glad to be back.
From where were you?
I don't even. Well, we were. I was down in
you
Georgia.
Blacked out. You've been just,
no. Well, I was down in Georgia visiting Lane. He was graduating from his
So we were
AIT.
talking about this. Did he graduate or is he about to graduate?
So yeah, and it's like, didn't he just graduate too? Yeah. So basic trainings where everyone has to go, and then after that, you got to get sent off to go to your specialty. So like for him, it's infantry. So he's done infantry training, and so he just finished that up. So he's still there though because he now has to finish his jump school. So he's going to airborne school. He's going to jump out of airplanes. It's 3 weeks long or 2.5 weeks long. And pretty much you practice jumping. I mean, just crazy. They have to teach him how to fall. So I think that he won't jump till his last few days, and he'll get in, I don't know how many jumps, and then he'll graduate from that. And then they'll send him off to the great state of Alaska. He's looking forward to it. Anchorage, Alaska, he'll be done. He'll be up there. So he and actually a buddy of him he's been training with is going to go up to Alaska. So at first he was like, Alaska, but I think he's pretty excited about it now.
Well, that's cool. At least he's got a friend who's going up there with him. And my other friend who's here is Zoe Kessling.
Hi, guys.
This is her first time on the podcast, and we're excited you're here. Do you feel sometimes like your dad should be including you in more of these round-the-world trips that he keeps taking and
here we
leaving
go.
you
know
to
what?
work
Don't talk about.
and
We're going to
slave
talk about.
away?
He left me.
I really did think I was going to Georgia with you guys.
Yeah.
I did.
I left the girls behind and took Gage to Disney World. And so, I mean, I'm surprised she didn't say this. So, there has been some trips, but what's beautiful when you're married and your kids get old enough, it's like, guys, we're leaving you home. We're going to have fun.
Do you find yourself sitting by the phone, waiting any second my dad's going to call and tell me I'm going to Disney World, like this is happening. And then you find out he's already posting selfies with Mickey Mouse and you're here in the cold.
Well.
In the snow.
In the snow. Yeah. No doubt. She's got her grumpy eyes on. There's some serious father-daughter problems happening here.
Can we get some counseling on this
Maybe,
podcast?
probably. Well, we're going to talk about some serious defective families.
It's going to be 10 years from now. She's like, I'm this way because my dad left me behind.
Anything.
It's like he didn't want to be with me.
You all are great people, and I am super excited to know the Kesslings. And so having Zoe out here is a lot of fun. She works at Glacier View Coffee Shop. Shout out to the GOAT.
Shout out to Glacier View.
And so we're excited to have you here. And really, she's here to keep us online. Jacob had a long day today, and so we're just kind of detoxing.
Yeah.
And we thought, why don't we
Podcasting's a great way to detox. It's great.
So if this ends with us just
sleep?
yelling at random people and this is what's wrong with the world, you'll know that you're part of this problem that we have going on. The solution is you. But last week we introduced the idea of the angelic rebellion in Genesis 6 and about how that freaks the crap right out of a lot of Christians. The idea that the supernatural world may not be as invisible as we wish that it was. And that in the Bible, and that's what we're talking about here, the biblical story, there have been times in the past where Satan's operation of attack against the kingdom of God was different than it is today. In our world, Satan's efforts seem to be, especially here in the West, is to lull the church to sleep. The less that he can get us to think about spiritual things, the better off that he is served in the end. A great book about this, I read it every year, C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters. If you've never read the Screwtape Letters, you need to start immediately. Or if you just don't read, go and get the audiobook and let someone read it to you. It would be a great way to pass your bus ride or your road trip or what.
He's got a very extensive vocabulary. I mean, it's funny. I just had a family member read through that with some friends or some siblings, and she was like, we had to have the dictionary out the entire time we read this book. This is terrible. But it is a great book, and to get a glimpse of kind of the fun way that he kind of weaves the spiritual warfare and how it takes place in the life of us, it's very clever. Can you imagine, though, when he first wrote it, how it was received from the public? Because it has a very interesting, how he wrote it.
He dedicated that book to Tolkien, the guy who wrote The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien hated it. He was furious that C.S. Lewis had,
Good thing he didn't write the foreword on the book.
Yeah, it would have been really bad. He was like, I can't believe that you put my name on this. This is garbage. I totally disagree with his assessment there. I understand that he wrote that book when he was bored in church one day. like the pastor started rambling on about something.
There would be lots of books written, I think.
I think we need more of that.
happening.
Like if I could preach a really bad sermon, but I knew that it inspired
People to
someone
write a
out
good
there
book.
to go do something awesome,
Wouldn't that be beautiful?
that would make me glad.
Yeah, it's like, John, I want to really say I thank you for that series you preached last
Thank
month because I
you
wrote a really great
for
book.
your dull look
I
at that
love it.
passage. I just could not focus. As a matter of fact, I thought no one could do worse than this man.
That's right.
And
yeah.
so it inspired me to give it a go. So maybe you're out there listening to this podcast and you're thinking to yourself, man, we are at the bottom of the barrel. And that's okay. Part of the hope of this podcast is not for you just to think what we think. We're talking about things that we're interested in, stuff that doesn't get often discussed in sermons and Bible studies and the weird corners of the Bible. And in particular today, we're going to be talking about ghosts and we're going to be talking about giants. And those concepts are not foreign to the Bible. The Bible has a lot to say about the disembodied dead. It has a lot to say about the ancient world. And sometimes it looks supernatural.
There seems to be a pretty good, I don't know, I don't want to say fascination, but a lot of Google searches on giants. There's a lot of people investigating this kind of stuff today. And it's not that we've been, for me, we haven't, most of us know like at least the David and Goliath story. So we'll say there's a giant there. And I remember even like in my early years thinking that Goliath had some pituitary gland issue and that's why he was super big. And okay, I mean, I just believe what I heard, right? But it's weird as I got older and stuff, and I'm starting to look at others, like it seems like there was more than just Goliath. But there's a huge fascination with it today, and I think this is cool. There's lots of podcasts, I think, that talk about these kind of things, and we're kind of navigate it through a little bit different way, which I appreciated, how it was explained. I explained it last week, but I'm excited to see what we're going to have our navigate through today.
And that's fun. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, I really want you to talk about this, or I really want you to talk about that, none of this all is going to fit in a 45-minute episode of anything. And so we're going to take this bits and pieces at a time. And honestly, I feel like I have until I break this board to finish the discussion. So I'm going to talk about whatever I want for as long as I want. And if it's not what you wish it was, then
Fast
bring
forward.
it up on the Facebook group and we'll discuss it there.
That's right.
But we're talking about the idea of giants in the Bible. And for many people, when they think of the word giants, they think of New York, the football team, or they think of like Greek myth. And the Bible talks about giants as well, but it doesn't talk about them as imaginary characters. It talks about them as real characters, just like demons, just like angels on the physical world. And they don't just appear out of nowhere. The first time we see them is in Genesis chapter 6, and they're called the Nephilim.
Yeah.
That word is the same word that the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament, authors translated as giants. And it meant people of unusual size, great big old boys. And it's not just talking about some person who's tall. Like I'm over 6 foot. Are you 6 foot?
6 foot. That's it.
That's it. No
I'm
inches.
actually, I think I'm 5'11" and a half, but I've always
shrinking.
yeah.
You got those high heels
well,
on though. Yeah.
yeah, you extra soul. It's like one of those. Like, how could you say I'm 5'11"? It's like 6 foot seems a lot better. I don't know.
So, what's the tallest person you've ever seen? Do you think?
In person?
Yeah, like have you ever walked up and been like, "Holy cow, that guy or that girl is really tall"?
Probably like 6'5", maybe.
Yeah.
I was at
Yeah,
Lane's
not
graduation, and there was this dude. I swear, he was on a lower hill, and I'm looking down at him. He is huge, and I'm like, I think he's taller than me, and he's like, I bet he was probably 7'5". I mean, and slender guy, not like bulky, not like a Shaquille O'Neal, but I was like, that guy is huge. He was just a big guy, but.
Yeah, I've ran into some.
But
big...
Zoe's she's vertically challenged, so like
Whoa. Whoa.
she is blessed from my mom's side, I think. But it's funny. But so like tall people.
This is where you're like, I am average height. So,
No.
like, you
I am
gotta
average
stand up
height.
for yourself.
I am.
Don't let him treat
She's
you
at a
that
beautiful
way.
height. It's a great height to be at. But
Aw.
she's not.
Listen to that fatherly love. It would
Yeah.
sound better if you told her that on the way to Disney World
That's true.
and
Yeah.
not having
And,
left her
and saying
behind.
it's a small world after all.
It's really upsetting. But anyway, I'm sorry, Zoe, to have picked you up there. But
Picking on you.
God.
human beings can grow pretty big. And so when it talks about giants, it really has less to do with the physical height of the person and more to do with the fact that they're not human.
Okay.
This is a supernatural event that's taking place. Most people in the ancient world are coming up around 5 feet tall. And so if that's the average height of a full-grown man, 5'5", 5'3" would be like as big as people
There you
got.
go, Zoe.
Yes.
Zoe's like, yes, I am a giant. Thank you.
I am average.
The idea of someone who's 6 foot or 7 foot or 8 feet tall, that's huge.
Yeah.
And the idea that humans can grow that tall, we know they can. We know they can. Goliath is described as a 9-footer. He was a big old boy.
Yeah.
But we don't see ideas like the Jolly Green Giant, where like human beings are like living in like his footprint and that kind of thing. That seems to rest in the world of myth and folklore, at least as far as I can tell. But I wasn't there. I don't know. And this is one of the fun things about the story. Nephilim, the giants of the Bible, are a separate race of beings. They're the offspring of rebellious angels and human women. There's an ancient attempt to destroy humanity because God had given Eve a promise that from her seed would come the deliverer, the one who would crush the serpent's head. And so there seems to have been an attempt to pervert the seed of woman and to create a new type of humanity that wasn't made in the image of God, but was made in the image of their fathers, these demonic beings.
Yeah.
Go
No, I
ahead.
was just thinking about that your seed will be at enmity with her seed. I know so a lot of times we think like, oh, this is figurative language, because I know like later on God, Jesus will say things like, you're of your father, the devil.
Mm-hmm.
There are individuals who represent the thought, feelings, and desires or agenda of the evil one. And that can kind of go that way. But there's literal offspring as well, like is what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And
And these are part of the rebellion of this heavenly realm to intermingle with
they're
humans.
neither human nor angel. They're twisted. The Bible sometimes calls them bastard spirits, abominations. They're demonic spirits clothed in mortal flesh. And so when you see Goliath, it isn't just that he's big. It's the fact that he is an embodied demon that is supposed to freak you right out. Like, this is a monster. It's not just some guy who lives out there who's really tall. This is a person whose gods are the underworld, whose fathers are, his ancestry goes back to this evil event that took place. And so it carries with it this like ghost story, this terrifying background. When you saw a giant, you didn't just think, man, I wish I was tall and could get things off the top shelf and that kind of thing. But that's what ladders are. The first thing I ever bought my wife was a ladder when we got married, a little step stool, because we didn't have any drawers or cabinets in our first apartment. So we kept everything on top of our refrigerator. And
Nice.
she's just not quite tall enough to handle the top
Can't
of the
reach the
fridge.
paper plates up there.
Yeah, so we like just were jamming everything on top of this. So the very first piece of like real furniture we bought was a step stool. And I'm okay with that.
Step stool / kitchen chair /
Slash everything else. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. But we usually think of the Nephilim as happening in the world before the flood. And they definitely did.
Yeah.
The Bible tells us that there were entire civilizations of people who were ruled over, led by, harassed by these beings, these monstrous, giant, evil guys.
Can I throw a side curveball for a second?
Sure, why not?
Like, so I remember when I was at school, I was in the library, decided just to read a book instead of buy it. And
No one believes this story.
it did happen. It's not that I don't. It's really terrible though, isn't it? But I was reading this book, and I remember, and this is like before I really was starting to dig into this at from any level. But it proposed this idea that Satan had a strategy of trying to taint the bloodline from keeping the Messiah from coming, if in fact the seed was going to come and crush his head. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading it, and it's weird even to this day because it's been so many years ago. Like, that's just stuck with me, and I don't know. I just thought about it, but never really took any part of it. Do you think there's any truth in that, in the sense that, if I was to, I don't know, I'm thinking about, is it Braveheart? If we can't beat them out, or we can't kill them out, or we'll breed them out, or whatever he says. You know what I'm talking about? The king.
No, but that's okay.
You've not seen Braveheart?
I've seen Braveheart, but I don't remember that.
When the king was like, if we can't get rid of the Scottish people or whatever, he gave him that primo nocte Okay.
Oh, I kind of remember.
Okay,
this.
so
yeah.
I was just thinking, but the idea of like breeding out the natural bloodline to keep this Messiah from coming.
I think that's I've heard that before, and I don't think it's unreasonable. We also get the impression from reading it that Satan wasn't directly involved.
Right.
He seems to have deceived a group of angelic beings
that's rebelled
into a rebellion against him, and so he distances himself from the actual falling that's taking place here. But you have to imagine he's involved. He's the trickster. Right.
I'm not saying he's that behind the scene orchestrating all this stuff. There's certainly something happening here. But do you also think that there's a sense of the desire for family, or there's all kinds of things that's been thrown our way on this. I don't want to stick all kinds of time in Genesis 6, but I just know it's one of the places the
He's
Giants.
really upset that he missed the last episode. Is really what this comes down
sorry.
to. We did
All right.
Genesis 6, and he was
Whose
gone
fault
for like.
is that?
Oh my
Exactly
gosh!
Right, it's your brother's fault.
Okay, well, carry on.
Exactly.
Listen, we
for
can come
having
back
a
to these rabbit
graduation
trails.
like every 3
We'll
days.
come back later, John. Carry on.
Carrying on. No, we can't carry on. We got to address this right now.
See, I like sometimes just to throw out some thoughts and let the listeners just run with it and like, oh, I never thought of that, and just let them kind of look at it. I'm not trying to find the answers necessarily, but just these are things been thrown my way, and some of them which I've like, I'll think about them for a moment.
I agree with what you're saying. I do. I personally think that. I think that you can also be the seed of Satan and not be related to anyone. That it's also just a way of saying that guy is not a nice person. Their heart pursues evil.
Right.
But in the Old Testament, in the beginning of time, there seems to have been an instance where this line got crossed, and the Lord responded with the nuclear option.
Yeah.
He flooded the world, and those beings, those watchers, those angelic beings, were chained up in chains of darkness, waiting the last day. And so that was a very clear message to any evil spirit out there that there are certain lines that you will not be permitted to cross. And never again do we see a worldwide or a large-scale Nephilim instance in the history of the world.
Yeah.
It happens
We'll see him
before
again,
the flood.
but not at that level.
But it's localized. It's very small. You get the idea that maybe it was one renegade angel. And we just don't know. It doesn't give us a lot of information. But the story isn't limited to the world before the flood, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
They make a last stand in the ancient land of Canaan. And sometimes spotting these giants in the text is easy, like when Goliath marches out to challenge the armies of God. And he's yelling and he's shaking his staff at everybody. And other times the modern reader can have trouble spotting the giants in the text because the biblical authors use ancient words and names to identify them. And we like to skip right over hard words or anything that smells like work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to pronounce that. I certainly don't know where that is or...
It's like when you have to read a text, even as a pastor and stuff, because you're like supposed to know it. I mean, there's times when I actually hit my Bible app and hit play. I'm like, how does that pronounce it? Because either you got to read it real fast, or you make up some kind of word and just hope everybody laughs.
Yeah, and no one's going to call you out because they're all praying. Don't call on me to say this
seriously.
word. But those words had meaning to the original audience. If I was to set a story in Auschwitz, which is a hard word to say, it's a funky word, it would have a very real evil connection to the story. You expect it to be filled with evil Nazis and horribly broken families, and it's going to have, even if I said it there now, you expect there to be a connection back to those old events.
Yeah.
The same is true in the Bible. And so those places that you're reading about are real places with real stories that the real people that read this book really already knew. And so for us, we have to do a little bit of digging to find out what those names meant. Because to them, they were obvious. To us, they're not.
So we're gonna go over like the names, words that are associating with giants. That would have been common to them, but not common to us.
Yeah, and we're gonna really hit 3 of them. I don't know, like we're already 20 minutes into this, and so the idea that we're gonna hit all of them, like Emim and Zamzumim and all that stuff, like we're probably just not. We can do those in a later event, but we're gonna hit 3 of the big ones that are here. But if just in case you ever do find a name that you don't know, a really great resource to have on hand is the Faith Life Study Bible. It's completely free. You click on it, you download it, and it will give you the information on those names.
Bible Project do anything on giants?
Yeah, they do. Uh-huh.
Do they really?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah,
I gotta
that's
go out
part
here
of their
and watch it.
story. Yeah, their spiritual beings.
They don't have a specific one on Giants, though.
No.
Okay. I just like, I don't think I've ever seen that. I know that Heiser talks about this kinds of stuff, but yeah, I'm just thinking about resources that people could go to. But all right. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
there's lots of it out there.
There are.
The Answers to Giant Questions podcast that you and I have listened to
Yep.
before. He's got tons of great information. Really, one of the reasons we're doing this episode early is we've been following Dr. Michael Heiser. He's just put out, more or less a farewell to the world, and
That's
just
sad.
really broke our hearts to hear. And in it, he talks about he's spent himself in service of the community, and so we're trying to carry on
Pass the
talking about
baton.
the things that he was
Yeah.
talking about. And so rather than just saying how much we love him, because we do, and how much his works affected us, because they did, we're walking through some of his material here in the hopes that somebody out there will learn from it, kind of
Pass
like
it
we
on.
did. And maybe you'll be the guy who learns loads of things and can really help other people in this upcoming generation. So we hope that that's true. But gathering tools is essential. The Naked Bible podcast talks about this stuff. There's loads of places you can go. Don't take anyone's word for it, but let it lead your study. Like, get back into the Word and dig it up. Get a good Bible dictionary, that kind of thing. But when you hit weird names, Jacob, where do you go to figure out what they're talking about?
It depends on where I find them. I mean, if I'm reading through genealogy stuff, I'm trying to make myself slow down, because I've found some really awesome, amazing gems in the midst of genealogies. But if they're weird names, like I do remember, and I think I've said this in the earlier podcast, going through Genesis with the Troy Christian group, and I remember all this. I mean, it was a random story. I think it was about Abraham or Moses. I don't even know who it was about, but I just know, like, in the middle of
Was
this
it
narrative.
a Word of Life?
Yes. No, it was not. It was at the school. I know. Yeah. Thanks, Zoe. So no, I remember it was like this is going on, and the sons of Anak were there, and then it just continues on, and I'm like, that's just so random. So as the class, I'm like, wait, for some reason, God just kind of stopped me there, and so when those kind of things happen now I stop, and I'm like, who are these? Why did they? What's the mention for? I mean, everyone would have known. Oh, the sons of Anak. So it made me pause, and I had no clue that was part of these giant clans, and so this took me on a whole other journey. So
Yeah.
when I see them, usually before I would have just went by one, but now I'm like, okay, it's here for a reason. Who is this? What is it? What's the connections? And so I start doing some research.
So, Zoe, if you're reading and you hit weird words, how strong is the desire to just like plow past it and forget?
I do.
That's your
do.
go-to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, normally if I know the situation that's going on, I kind of like just guess what it means.
Yeah, the Bible gives you a good job of like picking up the context. Like, this is sketchy. These aren't good people, kind of a thing. But when you're spending hours, there with your espresso, and you're making, people's beverages of just immense beauty, and the smell is fantastic, and everyone just loves coffee, right? And you're sitting there, and I assume you're watching TikTok like your father. And,
Yes,
and
Yeah.
there's much to
that's
learn.
what's happening, yeah. And there's real advantages to that, because those people pronounce the words for you.
That's right.
You don't have to like
Whether
kinda
they're
dig into it.
incorrect, they
Yes,
say
they
them.
Doesn't
do.
matter,
They
yeah.
say them very confidently.
But having access to, like, just with a flip of a button, like, there's a tremendous world of content creators that are out there. The ease of connecting with these things in these places. So I think our podcast is an example of that. It's not very hard to get it. You just
Yeah.
click a button and give it some time, and there we are. But it's an exciting time to want to read the Bible, because there are people who can help you. So imagine, Zoe, like, if you had like a massive job, like, how easy is it for you to like YouTube and find directions for something? Like, do you like call someone to do it for you, or are you the kind of person who's like, I can do this myself?
It depends. Mostly I try to find out how to do it, but sometimes I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes
There's
I just
there's
give
always
up.
an app.
There's
for it.
always, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can't
If
do your
Google
math.
doesn't work, I'll type it in the TikTok search bar.
Zoe is so creative. I mean, I know probably for me it's amazing, but probably for most students, like, there's apps that show you how to do all your math. There's apps that show you. There's apps
Step
for everything.
by step tells you what to
Yeah,
do.
she's
Like
she's
that.
super
That's
resourceful.
good.
It's kind of funny how well she gets through things.
But
and
I don't
around
think
things.
that's a negative thing in
No, it's
Bible
great.
study. I think that's a huge help.
Yeah.
For people who are determined to just do it on their own, they're going to miss lots of stuff. But if you're taking advantage of the tools that are at hand, and so this is maybe the one time I'll ever say something nice about your TikTok habit,
You're welcome.
is that
It is annoying.
yeah, isn't it?
Yes.
She's like,
You used to hate on
man."
it too.
I did.
Now it's a problem.
It's a tool. Let us say that. There's much to learn. Hey,
That's
these
what I
kids have
said.
brought. These kids have cooked. Jeez.
Oh, sorry,
They've
he was-
cooked
he
great
was getting
meals
out of
for
control
TikTok.
there.
Let's go through these words.
All right, so
Golly.
one of the first words that you're going to come across in the Old Testament is a word called Rephaim, 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 and you'll find it 25 times in the Old Testament. And it's the kind of word that you look at and be like, I don't know what a Rephaim is, so I'm just going to roll along past that, and I'm not really sure what it's talking about. But the word Rephaim is actually a really neat word because it talks about the dual nature of giants, of their spiritual element and of their physical element. And so it's a big word that can be used in different ways. Deuteronomy 3:11 uses it to talk about the physical giant clans that were living in Canaan. Great big old fellows that had spears and swords, and they were mean. It's also used to talk about the royal dead, those giants who died in the pre-flood world. It talks about their shades, their ghosts, as being called Rephaim. And so a Rephaim is this in-between being. And so in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9, you get the ruler of Babylon, which goes back to the Tower of Babel. This is an evil person who thought he was better than God, and God has humbled him. And there's a taunt that's there where God is taunting this person. And in the story, it says, in verse 9, it says, Sheol, or hell, beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come.
Dang.
It rouses the ghosts, the shades to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones, all who were kings of the nations. And anyone reading that ought to be like, holy smokes, ghosts, Sheol, this is weird stuff. That word there for shades is the word Rephaim. That these are their spirits, that just like your ancestors died.
It rouses the Rephaim
Yeah.
to greet you.
Like, this is bad news. This
Yeah.
guy is going to be swallowed. But it's like, that's horror film stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That these are beings that aren't chained up somewhere, that these are the lords of the dead, if you want to think of it that way. They live in the realm of the dead, but they are without power that they once wielded. They're angry, and when this person comes, they're taunting him, they're mocking him. They said, you're just like us. You thought you were greater than us, but in the end, death has conquered you too. The only example of someone who this isn't true of would be Jesus. When Jesus dies, he preaches to the spirits who are in chains,
Yeah.
and then he raises himself up from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
I think Satan really thought he had kicked butt when he
Yep.
killed Jesus and put him in the chains of death. And then Jesus takes the keys to death itself and rises from the dead. That concept carries with it these Old Testament ideas of the figures of the dead, that the spirits, when a person dies or when a giant died, they still were aware. They don't lose their personality. They move into another plane of existence, but they're not stripped of mental awareness.
When these Nephilim died, did their I've heard that their spirits were kind of what we now deal with as demons.
Yeah. So I use the word demon or demonic really to just mean bad spirit
Okay.
thingamabob that's floating around.
Thingamabob.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
that's the
just-
scientific
I
term
like that.
for that. Doohickey.
Yeah.
That it's very, very specific. You
Whatchamacallit.
probably wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
But the word that's there literally is this kind of a being, a Rephaim, and it's connected to the giant clans. It's connected to these beings of the dead. In the book of Job, we find this is there as well. This is a really weird one. In Job 26:5 and all the way through 6, it says, the dead, and that word there for dead is Rephaim, they tremble under the waters and their inhabitants.
This is this flood language.
It sounds like it,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Maybe that's the first thing I'm thinking of.
It
Yep.
also carries the idea, ancient peoples believed that the underworld there was water down there.
Okay.
Because if you dig a well, what comes up?
Water.
You
Yeah,
get water.
that's
Like
true.
there's water down there. So
Right.
sometimes when they talk about the realm of the dead, they use water image. We typically use fire image. The Bible uses both.
That's
but
because Looney Tunes, the escalator down.
did you ever watch Looney Tunes? Was that before your time, Zoe? Was that a part of your childhood at all?
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was more of a Courage the Cowardly Dog kind of
Yeah, classic. I like it.
so,
Courage the Cowardly, yeah. Verse 6 says, Sheol, and that word is hell. Hell is naked before God, and Abaddon, or the destroyer, has no covering. Now, that phrase Abaddon shows up in the book of Revelation, and last week I encouraged you guys to read a particular chapter. If you did, you'll recognize this. But this is talking about these beings as living amongst the dead. The book of Dictionary of Deities and Demons takes that word Rephaim, and it says that the word itself has something to do with the word for healing. And so it implies that these beings had magical powers or the ability to commune with the dead. They could wield power to impact the physical world. And everything about that sounds like witchcraft. It's supposed to. It carries with it that idea of the manipulation of invisible powers. And so when the Bible uses this phrase for giants, don't just think of a great big tall guy. Instead, think of an embodied demonic spirit who has the ability to do all sorts of strange and evil things. They're an evil entity, a monster in the clearest positive sense of the word. And there are living ones and there are dead ones, but all of them are bad. There's no examples of positive giants in the Bible, although Martin got on to me for not having read some book about a happy giant the other day. Did you read any books about good giants?
in the Bible,
Like in life?
I'm thinking like there's got to be a friendly giant somewhere.
isn't there?
Martin, we need you.
No, that one guy that climbed Jack and the Beanstalk. Isn't there a good giant up there, or no?
I'm pretty sure that's a mean one.
Yeah, I think
No,
he
but
wanted
there's
to.
lots of giants. Never mind.
I don't know.
Different movie.
I'm not up on my Jack and the Beanstalk. As I remember that one, he's a mean giant who imprisoned the golden goose.
Oh, okay.
I don't
thinking
know.
of the new movie. There's lots of giants up there.
Oh, well, there should be. I hate for him to be alone up there. He needs friends, especially if they're going to cut down his beanstalk and he's stuck up there forever without his goose. But in the Bible, you won't find any positive ones. The giants are monsters, and they're always monsters. The next word that you're going to find isn't Rephaim, but the Bible will use the word Rephaim. Sometimes it's hidden in the English, and sometimes it just straight up says it. But another place, and this is a place that identifies with giants, is called Bashan.
So when you hear this location, that's what comes to mind.
If I were to say the Third Reich, you would immediately connect that with the Nazis.
Right. Or if I said the Khmer Rouge, I mean, if I knew what happened in Cambodia, that's what I would think of. So these are words that would connect again
through the location, whereas the other one was a description of a word that meant them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another word for giants. This is a place that is connected with giants, and literally the word means serpent, which connects right away to our understanding of the Bible. The serpent in the garden. This is a land of the serpent. And if you were living in
it's the people of the serpent, could it be?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So the word is Bathon and the word Bashan. So these are two different words, but they carry the same idea. Michael Heiser talks a ton about this in his book, The Unseen Realm. And again, this is kind of a tribute to that concept.
For those of you who like videos, there's also an Unseen Realm video on YouTube you can watch.
Yeah, and Faith Life did a documentary, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Faith Life has a great resource on that. That's I thought it was very well done. They have a couple videos with him.
Super good.
Yep.
The land of the serpent, the realm of Bashan, is a real place. And it's to the north of Israel. It's what's today called the Golan Heights. Maybe you remember that from the news. There was big battles and things there when I was a kid, and still going on. It's a contested part of Israel. But in the north, there's a big mountain called Mount Hermon. And Mount Hermon, you can actually see it from Galilee. Like if you're down on the Sea of Galilee and you look off into the distance on a clear day, You can see it. It's where the waters of the Jordan come from. It's a towering mountain way off in the distance.
Does the United Nations have a building on that mount?
They do. They
Let's
do.
not.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that, but that's just interesting.
We are actually going to Mount Hermon, Jacob.
Yeah, I know, I can't
me,
wait.
and Sheila, and Steve
I'm
Richards.
jumping the fence.
You will not, because I will not be arrested. I am a good law-abiding citizen. Things you need to have a talk with your dad just before he goes on this trip.
I will.
Okay.
I know Sheila read that Reversing Herman book.
Yeah,
and
super
it
good.
talks about that. Yeah.
Michael Heiser, again, is the definitive author on this material. Go and download his talks. Go and download his books. Go and spend some time with the wisdom that Mike has left the world. It has been a tremendous treasure that he's left with us. And Mount Hermon is it's outside of Israel. In the book of Deuteronomy, which a lot of people skip because it doesn't sound fun. You know, you hit Leviticus and you're like, oh, no, this is not good. And Numbers by the time you hit Deuteronomy, most people have quit their Read the Bible Through in a Year program, and they miss out on some giant stuff. In the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 3, this whole passage, verses 1 through 11, is talking about the land of Bashan. And in this place, it talks about, Jacob, would you go ahead and read verses 1? And we don't have time to do the whole thing, but do you read 1 and verse 11?
Sure. Yeah. It says, Then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at, it just says Edrei. I'm assuming it has more to it. But verse 11 says, For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. It is not in Rabbah of the is a question. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit.
Now, this is an example of the kind of passage that can make your eyes glaze over. It's got these words. It's got that ... there is to say that the verse continues. That actually is the name of the place, Edrei. And it talks about a king living in Bashan, and his name is Og, which is not in contention for my son who's going to be born in May. That's not on the list for names that we're going to be considering. He is a Rephaim. He is a remnant of the Rephaim. And we just talked about this. So he is one of the giants. There seems to have been, after the flood, at least one time where there was another angelic rebellion. One of these beings created a rival bloodline to combat what God was doing on the earth. And the story of the conquest and a lot of the Old Testament concepts center around this idea of the giants, of the Rephaim. And this man, this is Og, he is one of the kings. He is one of the Rephaim, and he's ruling in the land of the serpent. And we actually can tell quite a bit about this guy, but what we can't tell, and this is going to upset some of our listeners, and I'm sorry, but you cannot tell his height.
Just his
from
bed,
this.
just his bed size.
So in our world, we think like, okay, my bed is like this big, and if you've got a king size bed, that does not mean that you are the dimensions of your bed.
That's true.
There is different sizes of
Right.
bed. If you have
Maybe he
a
had
hammock,
lots of dogs and
and he wanted
guests.
everyone to live in this. Yeah, so his bed is 9 cubits in length and in its breadth, and this is really interesting because we actually know. Hang on one second.
what a cubit and a span is. But isn't it interesting that, like, you know, out of all the things that can be mentioned, I'm going to tell you about how big his bed was.
Well, I think there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Let me pull up my notes here and see if I can't find it.
Is it so? Isn't it typically a cubit? The distance between your elbow and your finger or the palm of your hand. What isn't it something like that?
Yeah, it's about 1.5 feet, a little over a meter. It's the tip of your finger to your elbow. But and this comes from Michael Heiser's Unseen Realm, and just talking about what's up with the bed. And this is something that an ancient person would have recognized, but we wouldn't recognize. This may be the only time in the Bible that I know of where anyone's bed is measured. One guy that Jesus is talking to, like he's carrying his bedroll around with him, and the
Right.
Lord says, "Take up your bed and get out of here." This is specifically given, and the dimensions are given. Now, in the Bible, when it starts giving you dimensions of something, typically that's because it has ritual significance. It's because it has a concept to something to do with the religious world. And what we know about Og's bed is that it is the exact dimensions of the cultic bed of the ziggurat called Etymonanke, which also is not a name we're going to be naming our kid. Etymonanke is a ziggurat that a lot of archaeologists identify with the Tower of Babel.
And everyone listening is like, oh.
I hope so. But up on this tower, what would happen is the priests would attempt to sleep with the god. There would be an attempt to woo down the god, and there was to be a ritual bedding of either the king or the queen. There was an attempt to have a divine marriage take place. And this large bed at Etymonanke literally means the house of the bed, or Bet Esri. It's the place where the god Marduk and his divine wife, Zepatanu, met annually for ritual lovemaking, and it was supposed to make the world a better place. And so this guy has apparently taken this cult of Babylon and brought it down into Canaan.
Was this to have divine offspring? Like, was this to have?
That's what he's trying to do. Yeah, he's trying to say, this is showing you who is his Lord. What he's trying to do is to further this rebellion. It isn't just saying he had a big bed. It's trying to show you that this is a man whose loyalty is to the darkness. His gods are the gods of the underworld, and he is attempting to recreate the rebellion that was taking place before the flood. Bashan is believed by the ancient Canaanites and by the people who lived there afterwards, even up into Jesus's day, to be a gate to the underworld. There's a place there called literally the gates of hell. It's at, well, we're going to go there. We're pretty excited to go there. It's at Caesarea Philippi. And this Jesus actually goes there, and this is where Peter gives the famous, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And he says, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, Peter, but my Father which is in heaven. And he goes on and it says, listen, my church is going to storm the gates of hell. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. Yeah. This is what he's talking about. It isn't just that we're supposed to go take over this little corner of northwest Israel. It's saying instead we are to be storming the powers of darkness. We're not on the defensive.
Right.
We're on the offensive. We are to be overcoming evil with good. How do you overcome hatred? With love. How do you overcome lies? With truth. How do you overcome isolation? With community. It's our goal to see the works of the darkness and counter them. And so when the Bible gives you detail like this, there are people out there who are geeky like me, and they'll explain this to you. But ancient people would have picked this up a lot easier.
Yeah, I just look at it like, man, did you see how big this guy's bed is? Now, and again, it could lead me to think that, he was a giant man.
Which
he
was.
Said,
which he was.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that he was not. And of course, when you're, like when you're a teenage boy, you find all those passages in the Bible, and you're like, hey, what do you think about this? All the inappropriate stuff, I don't know if you had those days or not. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
One of the things we did before we graduated is we were all given an opportunity to go to the microphone and read a verse.
Yeah.
And
in front of everybody?
Yeah, it was, you got your diploma and you went up to the stand and you said a verse, and we all made a list of 10 verses that we wished we were brave enough to say at the microphone. We didn't do any of them. We were all cowards.
Oh, I know. I can imagine that. You guys reading them off or just lying,
so
just laughing hysterically, thinking what everyone would respond if you actually did that.
Visualizing your professor's face, as we're do we shut down the microphones? Do we take back their diplomas? I don't know what we're supposed to do here.
I love it.
But the mountain Hermon, where you find the gates of hell, this Pan's grotto, is associated with the rebellion before the flood. The book of Enoch makes Mount Hermon ground zero for where these angelic beings came down to. Enoch 6, chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. That's the story, that this is where it happened. This is the place of the serpent. This is the place where in ancient Jewish culture they identified with this pre-flood rebellion.
I'm not saying we treat Enoch like scripture, but did the ancients or the early church during Jesus' day, is that what they saw Hermon and Mount
Yeah,
Hermon as that
so-
as a place of rebellion?
Yeah, the Book of Enoch is not scripture, just isn't.
Yeah.
The Jewish people never considered it to be, but it
But they
was an
read it.
important book.
Yeah.
Like I, as a pastor, can quote Sherlock Holmes, and that doesn't mean that it's scripture, but it's an important book to me, and there's a lot that I can learn from this.
Yeah.
They considered the Book of Enoch to be a way of telling their history. It was a way of what many of them believed
Okay.
happened during the time of the flood.
It wasn't
And
just a
it's-
good book; it was an influential book.
It was
and
a
how they
very
understood-
influential book.
How they
Mhm.
understood
Absolutely.
the history. Okay.
And it's quoted in the Bible. The Book of Jude quotes from the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
And so this is definitely something that the early Christians were aware of. And in the Book of Enoch, demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And their whole rebellion centers around this idea of the descent onto Mount Hermon.
Mm.
And so this land called Bashan or Mount Hermon, all of that is connected to the giants.
So when you see that word,
Connected.
yeah, stop for a minute and say, okay, this is where my mind needs to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Because for us, like, again, if you're watching a movie and you hear certain, like we've said this before, music comes on or the colors of the screen or it zooms in on a space or there's certain colors or the room turns, like, we know what's happening here. And this is the beauty of what the Bible has, but we just don't see it. You see this, Bashan, let's move your place into, like, this is a dark place. This is a place that was seen as a, the home, or you think we're going to go to the music starting to get to an eerie space.
Right.
Okay.
It's
All right.
got negative, it's got hellish, it's got underworld vibes. This is the land of the Rephaim.
Okay.
And anyone visiting this place would have that in the back of their head. Just like if you visited Auschwitz, in the back of your head has got to be the reality of what happened here.
Right.
Not that, I mean, does the sun shine there? I'm sure it does. I'm sure there's lovely people who visit it every year or whatever, but it's a place now of memory, of remembering the evil that was done and of promising, never again. The Jewish people have held on to the memory and not let it be forgotten. And I think that's how it ought to be.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be forgetful. We should be holding on to these stories so that we know. And in the biblical sense of the story, the problem is that we don't like to read our Old Testament. And we have to actually remember what
We're a
these
New
places
Testament
were.
church, John.
Well,
We're a New Testament. It's so funny because even for years I thought that it's not that I was bored with the Old Testament or I don't know. This has been, again, this latest season of my life. The Old Testament has been so much fun to go back and read, and there's so much to learn there. So yeah, I'm hoping this inspires people to read. We have time for one more.
not even close.
Oh
No,
my
dude.
gosh.
We're over our goal here.
The attention span of our listeners is only under 55 minutes, and you can just no way.
The attention span of your host is right around
Oh,
there.
that's
Like
true.
I'm talking, and we convinced Zoe to come out here and hang out with us, and I'm just really glad you did.
I'm so tired.
She's been working all day. It's cool that you came and hung out with us. We're expecting snow again any minute now. The heavens will open, and we will get 5 feet of snow,
It's going to be great.
or maybe 5
School's
inches.
called off.
Yep.
Is
you
Newton
know.
called off?
Well,
No,
she's
Newton's
Upper
not,
Valley.
But Upper Valley's already canceled.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay, yeah. I don't know. We'll see what's happening.
It's a good day.
I may have Awana afterwards if school calls off. Then I don't have to do Awana. Not that that would be sad. Oh no, I'd have
Yeah.
an evening free.
So let's talk about that. I don't have to.
Well, we got to sign off now. I think that this is the end of our podcast. The next time we have the opportunity to get together, we'll have Martin back with us and maybe a new guest as well, because I doubt that Zoe will speak to us in public anymore.
I think Eve needs to be on here next time.
Eve?
Yeah.
Eve, I don't think likes me very much. Like she's always mad at me about something, and I don't know what I've done to offend Eve.
Any thoughts like where we're going next? So
We're going
like,
to talk about the Anakim,
okay.
the sons of Anak, and we're going to move into the realm of Goliath. But for
I love
all of
that.
you listeners out there, thank you for tuning into the Two Trees podcast. We want you to remember that Jesus is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the Lord mighty and awesome.